Hi everyone, this is Rachel from SunBearGlassCraft, and in today's video we're going to talk all about troubleshooting our edges. In order to have a strong, sturdy piece of stained glass, you need to make sure your foil is applied properly. This means that your foil is the correct size and is applied with the proper technique to make sure it's nice and even on your glass. If you need any refreshers on how to do this, you can go ahead and check out my 5 common beginner mistakes video, which I'll go ahead and link up here. So let's say you're all ready to go, your foil has been applied, and you go and start soldering as well as tinning and beading your edges, and you notice that your foil has lifted. This can be a pretty common problem, especially with beginners. I know that I struggled with this a lot when I was first starting out. So there's a few common factors that you need to take into consideration whenever you're applying your foil before you even start thinking about soldering. Today's video is going to be a little bit of foiling, a little bit of soldering. What we're doing is we're just taking our techniques that we learned from all of our previous videos and combining them all together and really making sure that we're not missing any steps. That way you don't have any horrendous boo-boos happen whenever everything is all soldered up. Trust me, it's happened to me before where I go, a project is finished, I'm applying the wax, and my foil has lifted and it's like wobbly. So we're trying to avoid that because that is heartbreaking. We don't want to take our whole project apart. So today's video will hopefully remedy that. I also have a super exciting Patreon announcement. The top tier on my Patreon now is going to be kind of like a subscription box where every month you're going to receive a Patreon exclusive mini sun catcher. So if you've seen my recent social media posts, I have some strawberries, some mushrooms, some succulents, just all sorts of little things. And I'm going to be making things that are that size for my Patreon tier. This is going to be limited to residents of the United States currently, just because I have no idea how that works with shipping and taxes and everything. This is going to be kind of just a test to see how it works, how everything runs with Patreon. I do all of my business through Etsy, so it will be kind of new for me and I'm going to be learning as we go, but I wanted to announce that. I will be announcing very soon what our first month is going to be, and a lot of it is going to be kind of random, but you've seen my work before. I do a lot of nature themed mushrooms, succulents, plants. I want to throw in some funky like UFOs, like little baby UFOs in there. So that is an option and it is limited to 5 people to start out with. So if you want to, go ahead and check that out. My Patreon is in the description box below. Factor number 1 that we'll be looking at is old foil. Since many of you are just starting out, I anticipate that your materials have just been purchased and this is not a problem, but there are a few out there like myself that might have inherited supplies that are many years old. I encountered problems with my foil in the beginning where it just didn't seem sticky enough to really stay on the glass. If your foil is old enough to have tarnished, it's probably lost some of its stick, so it would be best to get a new roll. I personally never throw anything away, which is why I still have my old foil in my caddy. Factor number 2 is foil backing color. I only use black backed foil since most of the work I do is with opaque glass. Foil backing color only matters when you're working with clear or transparent glass where you'll be able to see the foil backing. It's from my own experience and from hearing other artists that black backed foil tends to have the best stick, while copper and silver backed tend to lift more. I don't know the specifics as to why, but possibly due to them using a different kind of adhesive. Our third factor is going to be oily or dirty glass. Before you start foiling, make sure to wash your hands and get as much of the natural oil off of your fingertips and palms as possible. From my experience, if there's any oil on the surface of the glass, the foil will lift more easily. What I do to negate this is wash my hands, and just before applying the foil, I wipe the glass in a cloth. As you can see here, after I wipe my glass down, I'm careful to just touch it around the edges and not actually put my fingertips on the face of the glass again. I've seen some glass artists wear cloth gloves, although I assume they're fancy and don't produce lint, and you all know that I like to keep it simple. Factor number 4 is probably the most important, and that is dusty edges. Like I said, this is probably the most common reason that your foil is lifting, so it's very important to get the glass dust off of your pieces after you grind them. You can either rinse them in the sink, making sure you run your fingers over all the edges, or you can use a wet cloth. I personally like to use a microfiber cloth, although you can just use any old washcloth, it doesn't really matter. Either way that you decide to get the dust off, whether you're washing it in the sink or with a rag, just make sure that the glass is completely dry and dust-free before applying your foil. Our fifth factor is going to be insufficient burnishing. Getting the wrinkles out of your foil is extremely important to preserve the integrity of your stained glass. And I quote, "It is not necessary to burnish with such energy as to attempt to form a molecular bond between the copper foil and the glass. Simply smoothing out the wrinkles will suffice." The reason why this is so important is because if wrinkles exist, especially on the faces of the glass, flux can get in and assist in lifting the foil. I also like to make sure to burnish the edges of the glass, usually smoothing the edges first and then getting the wrinkles out of the faces last. I honestly tend to over burnish and I am super detailed about it. I don't like there to be any wrinkles at all, so I do kind of lean towards forming a molecular bond between the foil and the glass. This is how your foil should look whenever you're done burnishing. The foil should be completely flush with the glass, and there will be a few imperfections, but just try to get it as flat as possible. Our final factor to look at is inappropriate iron temperature / foil being exposed to heat for too long. There is absolutely a Goldilocks temperature to solder your edges with, tinning and beading included. For this, I'll be using my iron for reference, so this might be a little bit more difficult to control if you have a hobbyist iron or a rheostat machine that controls the temperature, but I find that 410 is the perfect temperature for soldering the edges. 360 tends to be a bit too cool, and for me, always results in a lumpy looking bead on my edges. Even with the proper amounts of flux applied, this temperature is a hard time blending solder together. Now, it's important to make sure you're not holding your iron on a specific spot for too long, because if the foil is exposed to high heat for too long, it can cause the adhesive to burn and allow the foil to lift. It's for these reasons that, as you can see in the video above, I only bead a small portion at a time, and I'm very quick about it. I like to move my iron back and forth a few times to just really heat up that area and just really blend it all together, but I'm not staying for too long. The pause that you see me do after every time I apply is just allowing the solder to cool and set. I also have a little bonus factor, and that is make sure you're applying flux to the edges before you try tinning or beading. I've gotten this comment a few times in the last few weeks, one of which specifically said they felt like they were painting the solder onto the foil, and I assume that that was because there wasn't enough flux. So as you can see here, I'm applying my solder directly to my foil. There was no flux applied, and you can see where it's super spotty and it's just like not even attached to the foil in one part. I always say when in doubt, apply more flux, but just make sure it's not drowning. Well, I think that just about covers it for today's video. As always, if you have any questions at all, please feel free to leave a comment down below. And I also have my Patreon and PayPal down below if you'd like to help support me in that way. I hope all of your projects are going well, and I will see you all in the next video. Bye!